Welcome, my name is Colleen Tauke and I'm a sewing specialist at Fons and Porter. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put together the vertical columns for baby bricks. For the pattern for this project, visit our website. Now you can see that there are a wide variety of fabrics in this little quilt, and we're going to be using 5-inch squares to start, and then we're going to be cutting them in half. And some would say, why even start with 5-inch squares if you're going to be cutting them each in half? Well, the nice part about the pre-cuts is that pre-cut yardage usually comes from an entire fabric line, so you get a few pieces from everything in the fabric line instead of having to go out and buy yardage of the entire fabric line. So the color coordinating is already done. The wonderful colors from an entire line of fabric is ready for you to use. So we're going to use those 5-inch squares and follow the pattern instructions for the number that is required for this pattern, and then we're going to be teaming up with a bright white. So we're going to cut each of the squares in half. That will yield these rectangles that are 2.5 by 5. Then what we're going to be doing is creating the vertical columns that go in this quilt. There are 3 of them, and we start the first column with a rectangle and of the print, and then a rectangle of the white. So then we alternate back and forth. We just use 2 of the rectangles of the print, and then 1 rectangle and 2 white on one on each side. Now, because you're going to be using a variety of fabrics, you may want to use a design wall or lay them out in your sewing center area so that you can kind of intersperse the variety of colors and prints within each of the columns. So create 3 columns. Yours will be a little longer than this, and you can see how many pieces are within each column. And once you've created that, then you're going to be flanking that on each side with a strip of white. And that acts as the spacer between the 2 columns so your eye has some place to rest. And it gives you a fun place to do some quilting. Once you've created your entire top, you'll see that the quilt behind me has this wonderful stripe binding. And in order to create a stripe binding that, if you were traditionally cut fabric off of yardage stripe, you would get these small short pieces, and then when you fold it to binding, it would just have these little tiny bars of color. But the one used here, they're cut diagonally, so you get kind of the candy cane striping effect in the binding. And in order to do that, we take yardage, and I've begun to cut pieces here already for diagonal cuts like this. So you're going to be using your ruler, and rulers have all these wonderful angles on them marked, so you can come in and use the 45-degree line, which will give you a perfect bias cut. And you can, I've straightened my fabric before I started and line up the 45-degree line and make a diagonal cut through, and then traditional binding is somewhere around 2¼ to 2½ inch wide. So then I moved over and I cut a 2¼ inch piece off. And you would continue in that like manner across your fabric and then join your pieces together to create a stripe binding with a candy twist. Because as we then fold these, you will see this is similar to the one on the wall, not exact, but you get that diagonal stripe going around your quilt outer edge. Thanks for joining me today. For more of our Quilting Quickly tutorials, visit our website. Thanks.